Okay, so for the politicalization of science, I've chosen to do a slideshow presentation. I know it's a little dark in here. I had to do it so you could actually see the presentation on the TV and me partially. I'm very sorry for that. Two things real fast. I am sorry that my hair is kind of a mess. I just showered. And also, you might see my dog at multiple intervals because I am talking and standing up, and she'll get really excited about that, and I can't kick her out of my room or else she'll sit outside my door and bark and whine, and that won't make for a great video. So I'll go ahead and get started. Addison O'Brien, by the way. So what is the politicalization of science? So basically it is using politics and science, coinciding them, and abusing those powers. So politics tend to override facts. Most people tend to rely on what their party says over what the facts of science say, and they tend to really rely on that kind of stuff. You'll see a lot of, Democrats tend to think the planet's gonna burn down because of global warming and people are causing it. Republicans, on the other hand, think the exact opposite, that the planet's not changing at all. One might be right, the other might not be. Either way, they belong to those parties. That's what they think, that's how they act. The parties have the same incorrect beliefs. Who knows best? Really, it's the scientists that know best. That's why we try to keep our science beliefs and our political beliefs separate, say with religious and political beliefs. It should all be kept separate because really that's how we get the best results, but it doesn't tend to be that way. So, the causes of politicalization. A lot of it is charismatic speakers. People get up there, they say what people want to hear, then they bring science into politics. Al Gore was a big one, I know. I watched his documentary way back in middle school on climate change back when he was a presidential, well, I think it was after he was a presidential candidate that he made the video, but he was a big one that was a huge pusher for, hey, we need to change this is what's happening. And he was a really good speaker, and he brought a lot of personal issues into it to try and appeal to people's beliefs. Crowd mentality. Other people are believing it, I should believe it too. It's a very common thing. You're safer in a crowd. If other people believe it and you're wrong, and you're all wrong together, the chances are you're not all wrong. If everybody believes the same thing, you can't all be wrong. That's what people like to think. And that tends to work in people's minds. And then party-dependent characteristics. So I have this picture here. It's a political cartoon. The big book of Republican Science. Not to be picky with the parties. I don't really go either way most times, but it's a common belief that Republicans tend to bring more religion into their sciences. So they think the earth is a lot younger than it is. They have different beliefs on how people should act, how things happen, in what order, because they tend to mix different things. And even when scientific fact is like, hey, we have this evidence otherwise, it tends to be, well, we have this book that's been rewritten a few times, and we think this, and everybody's free to think what they want, but when it comes to science, you can't really pick and choose. Consequences and benefits. Well, let's start with the consequences, because those are more obvious. Consequences. The spread of misinformation, that's a huge one. So, with the politicalization of science, politics are a huge thing. They're everywhere, everybody's talking about them, they're always happening. So, everybody is always going to be spreading that information, and if that information is not correct because it's more of a political belief than scientific fact, that is an issue. Same with holding political values over scientific fact. So people can literally be shown that this is not how the world works, this is just how you believe it works. This is how the world works. And people will go, nuh-uh. And that doesn't really work. It doesn't change what we know to be true. And that's an issue. Benefits, scientific discussion. I only listed one, but it's a pretty big one. So even though there is misinformation being spread, it is bringing to light a lot of discussion about science. So like, yes, a lot of stuff about climate change is getting misconstrued and talked about incorrectly, but people are talking about climate change, which is good. The more we have discussion about it, the more opportunity we do have to jump in and correct people and be like, hey, you heard it this way, this is how it actually is. Or when people talk about the vaccines, hey, you want to have this discussion, let's actually talk about what you want to talk about and the way it should be talked about. Opening the door to the discussion is honestly a good step towards a lot of scientific topics that wouldn't normally get discussed. And it can sometimes outweigh the consequences, which is why I only listed the one. Politicalization in physics. So I did choose climate change and vaccines because those are the big ones. So climate change is more of an environmental physics. This is harder to see because my screen is orange. I'm so sorry. It's just pictures. It's mostly me talking. So climate change and the politicalization of physics. Obviously, I feel like more on the Democratic Party. Everybody thinks it's a man-made problem. The world's going to end in 30 years. I have heard before and been scared. Will you stop? Been scared that half the United States is going to go underwater. I heard that once in middle school. That like Florida and California and our coast were going to sink under because that's how fast the world was melting. I feel like I've grown up since then and learned a lot, so I don't think it's happening that fast, or anything is. And then I feel like there's people on the more Republican side who don't believe that there is any change. And then there's the third side, which is the scientific side, which points out that, well, it's interesting. You'd have to do your own research. I personally haven't done my own research, so I don't want to say anything because I'm probably wrong, but it either is or it isn't. Or I think it's somewhere in between, more likely. But then there's vaccines. That's a huge topic, especially because we have the Facebook moms right now that are convinced that vaccines cause autism. And vaccines are killing our kids because of one false review that got out there. Wasn't peer reviewed. It was a thing that somebody did research on. It's not proven. Got out there, and now it is a huge deal. I want to say it's more on the Republican side because that's more with the religious people who believe we should be more natural. And while I do think that some vaccines, there are some negative aspects of, like, new experimental vaccines that we don't know the long-run effects of. Most vaccines are highly tested. We know exactly what we're putting in our body, how it'll react with our stuff in our body. And it doesn't cause autism. Autism is in the brain and already there. That's, psychologically speaking, not something that can be caused. So I don't know where that really came from. Apparently people are scared of their kids having autism. But overall, those are two big ones. So I picked more of the medical world of physics and the environmental world of physics because those are the two that I am most familiar with. Personally, I'm not as good with the other stuff, but these two are the ones I'm more passionate about. Politicalization, is it a crisis or is it a problem? I personally see it as a problem, not a crisis. I feel like crisis is a big word. So like crisis means that it's like something that we need to end right now because it is hurting us and hindering us and it's going to be our downfall. In reality, I think it's a big problem. I definitely think it needs to be stopped to a certain extent. I understand why it exists. I think that you can't take science out of politics 100%. But overall, I think that it is a problem, not a crisis. We should solve it, but we shouldn't treat it like the world is ending. How bad is it? It's pretty bad, but it's not the worst thing that could be happening. I think that there are other things that probably desire our attention more than politicalization in science, but I think that if we keep going on the track we're going, we could go up to crisis territory pretty fast. Possibly. And I ran out of storage, and I realized you can't see any of my slides, so I'm going to post a slideshow. Final thoughts. Is the definition of politicalization biased? Personally, after reviewing what you have posted for us to read, yeah, kinda, just a little bit. So, the point of science is knowledge for the world. We want to learn things, we want to be educated, we need to know. And I understand why there is science in the political world. People get to a point where they need to know why that these things are happening. I think that the climate change discussion should be happening in politics, but I think that there is a line that is being crossed when people get too intense about it, and then false information gets brought up, and then people won't take in new information. I feel like the definition of politicalization is literally to use science and the benefits of politics, and I feel like that's how it started out. You know, somebody got up there one day and was like, we need to change this because it's happening and it's bad and I stand for changing it. And then we get to the point where we're in a world and we can't sit down and have a civil discussion, and it gets to the point where, well, you think this way and you think that way and that's stupid. Why don't we all think in the way of the facts and we get more done? Personally. So I think it is a little biased when you say politicalization in a derogatory tone, because I think in a certain way it was supposed to be, it was meant to be that way, but now it's not because people took it too far. So I think it needs to not be taken as far as it is, but overall I think it's good. I think it's okay to have those discussions. And that's the end of my slide. Thank you.